with the order unless I'm told that I can move things based on one of our guests that might be coming in or someone to help us, I believe, with the capital bond financing updates where we might have that adjustment. So we're going to go ahead and start with the Roadmap 27 first trimester report from Dr. Kasuda. And so you're up for us. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Good evening, everyone. Happy to be presenting the first report, fall report, Roadmap 27 update. Can everyone see this nice thumbs up if you can see something that says
you can see your audio is a little light though.
Oh, my audio. Okay. Let me do a little bit of adjustment here. Turn everything way up.
That's better.
Much better? Okay, great. I'll first start by saying if you've had a chance to download the presentation from Boardbook, or if you haven't, please, I highly recommend it. The slides are pretty detailed, and it might be useful for you to have that somewhere on your screen or off to the side there if you want to look at some of the details that aren't maybe as visible projected. So, all right, so I'm going to jump right in. We've got about 20 slides, so I'm going to maintain a perky pace here. I'm going to jump right into our first goals, building a strong foundation pre-K. Goal 1 focuses on building a strong academic foundation for in our earliest grades, because learning in pre-K through grade 3 sets the trajectory for students' long-term success. We monitor grade 3 specifically because it aligns with the Oregon Integrated Guidance priorities for early literacy and numeracy, and because proficiency by the end of 3rd grade is a strong predictor of later academic success. Currently, as you see here, 38.6% of grade 3 students are meeting reading standards based on the fall STAR assessment, which is similar to last fall's results. This level of performance is below what is needed to meet our Roadmap 27 goal. This fall data serves as our baseline for the year, and our target is to increase reading proficiency to at least 42% by the end of this school year to stay on track to meet our 2027 excellence target. These results indicate that too many students are entering upper elementary without the foundational skills they need. And while this reflects unfinished learning from earlier years, it reinforces the need to accelerate improvement rather than maintain current performance. You see here reflects pre-K math as measured by the fall STAR assessment. This current baseline shows results that are similar to last year and below our desired trajectory. Our goal is to increase math proficiency to at least 37.5% by the end of this school year to maintain a track towards our 2027 excellence target, as you see here reflected on the slide, which is 40.6%. We are prioritizing instructional consistency through clear alignment to standards, structured instructional practices, and stronger grade level collaboration. Our improvement strategy focuses first on strengthening core instruction so that more students succeed in Tier 1, or what we call core settings, instructional settings, before additional interventions are added. Right. So digesting the last couple of slides and the outcomes that you see there at this point, wanted to talk a little bit about, what we're going to do. What we've been doing and what we're going to do. So this slide, you'll see a section there listing actions and then the next level of development. Our improvement strategy is grounded in strengthening what we call core instruction. We have implemented district-wide standards mapping, structured literacy practices, clear identification of critical standards so that teachers are aligned on what matters in teaching most. Through elementary PLCs, or professional learning communities, teams are collaborating around these priorities. Our next phase is strengthening how teams use formative assessment data, so instruction is adjusted in real time based on student learning. At this point in the year, these fall data represent baseline performance rather than growth. We expect to see improvement by spring as instructional consistency increases. This goal area remains a top priority, as I said, because early academic foundations have the greatest long-term impact. I wanted to invite April, see if she has anything she wanted to add around her very focused work with elementary professional learning communities.
We thank you, Tasha. We are really committed to the work with each grade level, every teacher at each grade level for our standards mapping this year. Well, we have had curriculum maps or scope and sequences. They weren't always tied or aligned to the priority and critical standards. And so giving teachers an opportunity to really unpack those standards collaboratively rather than have someone present them with a document that tries to explain the standards, as well as establish the success criteria and develop summative assessments that are aligned to those standards so that PLCs can backwards map is really a focus of ours this year, especially in reading and writing. We just scheduled our third round of meetings with all of our staff. We're receiving very positive feedback, especially their appreciation of being involved in the development and the understanding of the standards and what we are expecting our students to know and be able to do.
Mm-hmm. And you'll see it threaded throughout this presentation that we, as a district-wide team, have school-level teams come together every trimester for what I'm sure sounds familiar to you, the Data Summit. That is one event of many that, again, encourages a cycle of looking at information around student learning and adjusting our plans, our action plans. And the idea is those teams go back to school buildings and replicate that data analysis process and really thinking critically about what is having an impact on student outcomes and what may be lagging and changes in instruction that needs to be made because of it. And I'd like to invite at any moment if you have questions, although I can't always see the hands, they're really tiny on my screen. So you may have to unmute, but at any moment, if you have some questions as we go through each goal, I see Jess's hand. Yeah.
Hi,
Hello.
thank you. Yes, so the improvements, you're hoping to see some results by spring. I mean, that's 3 months, 2 months.
Yeah.
What are realistic expectations for what it's going to justify improvement?
Mm-hmm.
We're at 38.6. Do you want to be up to 40? Do you want to be what is going to be considered a successful improvement?
Yeah, successful improvement for language arts or reading, I should say, is we need to have 42% by the end of the year. So I would say by the next term, and percentages increase slowly and incrementally when you're working with hundreds of student data points, right? But 42% by the end of the year means we should be hitting 40% or more by next term. So the next time we meet, our goal is to have more than 40% students at grade 3 reading, meeting grade 3 reading benchmarks, right? And similarly for math, it's a few percentages above that as well. In order for us to get to 40, you divide the difference in half, that's 6 points, 3 percentage points. So we should be 37, 38% meeting grade level proficiency in math at grade 3 by the next time we meet.
So that'll be the expectation that we have by spring.
Yep, that's what we're aiming for, right?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about goal 2, supporting every student's well-being and inclusion. This slide reflects 3 responses that students provided us to 3 questions from the elementary student perception survey. And we call our perception surveys in fall and winter progress monitoring surveys. We took 10 highly critical questions that we wanted to monitor the constructs of from our comprehensive survey. Our comprehensive survey is about 30 questions or so but we wanted to monitor in bite sizes and really focus in on some of these constructs like inclusion, well-being, that kind of thing through these questions. So students take 10-question survey in fall and winter instead of 30 questions, which can be, give them survey fatigue by the end of the year. So in this survey, we have 3 questions. I feel like I belong at school. There is at least one adult I can go to if I have a problem, and my school is a welcoming and safe place to be. We see areas of strength as well as some variation by school and student group, which indicates that the student experience is not yet consistent across the district. This perception data typically changes more gradually than achievement like reading and math because it reflects trust and climate over time and varies quite a bit over time with our students depending on lots of things that happen in the school year, right? So given our high student mobility, building consistent relationships is especially important. And we continue to strengthen advisory structures, class meetings, MTSS or multi-tiered system of supports structures to ensure students experience predictable, supportive adult connections. We'll be talking a little bit about MTSS in an upcoming slide, provide you a little more detail of what that would look like. All right, so this slide reflects secondary students' perceptions of safety, inclusion, and belonging, focusing on those same 3 questions, right? We see overall an upwards trend in belonging and feeling welcome, with those indicators meeting the excellence targets you see. And you'll see here, I'm not sure if you'll actually see my cursor, but there's a dotted green line that starts in the middle of the cluster of first question bars here at 59.7%, 71%, and then down to 57.4%. I was having a discussion with Superintendent Owens earlier today that this dotted line on this particular graph might seem deceiving, like this is some sort of progress line. These are actually static excellence target markers. It's a little different than the slide prior, where at the elementary level, you'll see our excellence target that we set based on our baseline and where we wanted to be is 95% across all questions. So as these bars rise, we hope it meets this green line, and because it's the same for all, that bar makes sense. I see here, recognize that this dotted green line might not make as much visual sense, but know that our excellence target for I feel like I belong at this school should be as 59.7%. At least one adult I can go to is 71, and a welcoming and safe place to be is 57.4% there, right? Our goal, I should also mention, fewer students report having a trusted adult, which remains an area of focus of ours. Our goal is not to simply meet targets, which are not particularly high, but to ensure high and stable levels of belonging that reflect a healthy school culture across all schools.
Dr. Katsuna, you've got a question from Director Solowski.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. I just have a question about these excellence targets. So with the math and those type of things, I know that we're at an incremental level of where we are. We keep moving our targets. Are these targets going to be moving, or are these like we're really shooting for 59% of students feeling belonging?
That's a great question. These are the excellence targets we set when we first launched our strategic plan. Like many plans, I would not say that 59.7% is an acceptable response rate for that question. And once we hit it, our intention is to keep setting a higher bar for ourselves. And we recognize the critical nature of students' feeling of safety, inclusion, belonging, and academic success being really dependent on that in the schools. So yes, the bar will be raised if we meet it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. So let's see here. This is a slide that reflects attendance. And you'll see here on the far left side, 56.7%. That's aggregate. Pre-K post-12 students across the district, right? That's single, very broad indicator, right? There are attendance data is very, very complicated when you look at all levels and disaggregate it in a variety of ways. And so for the sake of monitoring, we're looking at that very high level singular aggregate data point and then monitoring every term over time. Know that schools, when they're operating in their MTSS teams, are continually monitoring data at a much more disaggregated manner so that they can really target strategies and approaches based on what they're seeing the needs are and the supports that may be needed, right? But purely for monitoring sake, you'll see these really broad numbers, right? I'll say this is one of the most concerning indicators on the dashboard, because attendance directly impacts every other outcome. The board may reasonably ask why this number is not higher. And I'd say the answer is that attendance is influenced by a number of very complex factors, some of which are out of our control and a number of which are out of our sphere of influence sometimes: health, stability, right? Sometimes transportation, and at the same time, the district, has made great strides in mitigating transportation barriers, right? But I'm just providing a couple of examples, right? And so it's important to note that policy doesn't change attendance, right? You can have the best written policy that's not going to necessarily impact the outcome of attendance, but provide a clear direction, right? So that must not deter our work, despite all of these significant influences in monitoring and intervening on attendance, improving the culture and climate of learning environments, and partnering with guardians to emphasize the importance of regular attendance. All of those things are within our control, right? Our strategy is shifting from compliance-based approaches to relationship-based and system-based supports through MTSS and school teams.
Chair
Yes.
Shields had a question.
Okay,
The last
thank you.
slide.
Thank you.
Going back, you don't have to move the slide.
Okay.
But safety and inclusion, right? And here we are with well-being and inclusion. And you did mention all the factors that can have impact. We are living in an extremely difficult political environment. A huge safety concern within East Multnomah County. And there's an assumption I am making that this has impact on how students are going to report out. It's also going to have impact on how many students actually do feel safe to come to school. It may not be a matter of being in the school, but just getting to and from a school can be a challenge for some of our student population. So when we do this reporting, just like when we had to do this with our pandemic reporting, I think it's appropriate, especially if anything gets published, that there's the asterisk, there's a footnote, there's something that reflects back to these kind of difficult times that have impact on our students. And it allows us to say, how do you drop from 64, almost 65% to, 10 points in 1 year in the same month? Well, if you reflect back on what that month was like previous, right? We might remember some of the things that were challenging for our families. And sometimes we need a way to look at the footnotes, if you will, or whatever mechanism we have to reflect back on the influences that are not under our control.
Yes, that is a very good point. Director Wright and I were just discussing this earlier. Just even influenza A that has hit our area has decimated the attendance in some of the schools, and we don't want students coming to school when they're not well, right? So this is one of the things that makes it that we have to consider and keep in mind when we're looking at attendance data. And so this is a great example of when schools look at attendance data, they're looking at all the reasons students are out. That matters, right? And so that's I think the power of having a MTSS system where folks are looking at much more detailed data. And that's why I was emphasizing this is a very broad number. And at the same time, because the data is so voluminous, that percentage won't change quickly, even if we have great attendance. It will take a long time for that percentage rate to go up because it's cumulative and it's the aggregate of thousands of students and thousands of data points throughout the week, right? So those are all things to keep in mind. And we are not happy with this attendance rate at all, right? And so we have some pretty important questions to ask ourselves around what we can impact in terms of supporting attendance. When we get to the MTSS part, I'm gonna punt it over to Denise because I know she spearheads a lot around MTS supports and teaming across the district, and I want to make sure that we tap into that information on what is happening there.
Tasha, I've got a quick question. Oh, James does too.
You go first.
So are there schools, I appreciate that you talk about this as aggregate data. Are there schools that you can see that are potentially bringing the aggregate up, like that are wildly different? And are you guys able to really then see what some of the outliers are doing that could potentially help move the data? Is that kind of what happens in those data summits?
Yes,
Director?
absolutely. And I was going to say, so for example, Meadows has a higher attendance rate overall and has maintained a consistently high attendance rate for a variety of reasons. And different schools have, leadership or leaders have interacted with the principal there to figure out what she's doing around culture and climate. It's a place of joy that when you walk in, you just feel it, right? And students want to be there. Pleasant Valley has had some great successes and has been acknowledged for the growth and attendance, right? So it's not to say that there aren't some bright spots and some growth there and some learning to be had across the district, which I don't want to steal Denise's thunder. I want to make sure she has it, but that's a good point. But overall, when you look at our district, there are some significant attendance challenges and issues that we need to address. But yes, there are successes. Absolutely.
My question was going to be similar to Director Selowski, which is that Centennial has been recognized by ODE, and then we also have embargoed data, so I can't really speak to that. It'll be released later this week, except to say that in that data, I believe it shows year-over-year increases in attendance. So that's if there's a nuance in between the data that we see here, which shows a trend down, and then the things that I just mentioned, which show a trend up. I don't know if this is you, Dr. Katsuda, or Director Wright, if you can speak to some of that discrepancy.
I think maybe Denise should.
Sounds like you're passing it my way. One of the things with data is often assuring that we have the same data points that we're looking at. And so being able to look at the data that Dr. Katsuda shared, this is the same data point, and being able to look at it, and then the embargo data. We also have similar data points. And so our attendance data continues to be low. We will need to have to look at both pieces so we can really get at why is it showing up better looking in one place than the other. And ODE definitely scrubs data in some different ways potentially than we do as well. And overall, we want to celebrate any of those little tiny wins that we've been having year after year, because before the pandemic, we were not happy with our attendance rates, and it's definitely taking a really long time to recover post-pandemic. And to Director Shields' point, there are so many things that are happening right now in the world that we're really trying to hone in for students who are staying home because of fear, or families who are staying home because of fear. We want to make sure we're getting those students connected with resources because we don't want them out of school before that. We have other students and families that there's misconceptions around when we look at our kindergarten attendance rates. They still continue to be way lower than we would expect. And some of that is around misconceptions of families not realizing the importance of kindergarten, that while it's not required, it has a huge long-term ramifications when it comes to developing those habits. And so we continue to build family awareness around that. And then when we have students who have aversions to school, so the additional data when we look at the climate and culture and some of the academic pieces, they're so intertwined that attendance is really one data point and can't just be looked at by itself, because everything connects so strongly that the more that we're working on climate and culture, the more that we have engaging academics, we would expect our attendance rates to go up, and all of our schools are focusing on that.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the question. All right. So the next two slides reflect student engagement using additional responses, 3 responses, or 2 questions related to effort, persistence, and enjoyment in school. So I can learn almost anything if I try hard enough. I work hard to do my best in school, and I like going to school. This slide reflects the elementary grades 3 through 5 student survey response rates. These questions are, actually, let me see here. These questions are strong indicators of whether students are cognitively and emotionally invested in learning. Lower engagement often aligns with instruction that feels less relevant or less connected to student voice. And our work in this area focuses on improving instructional relevance and expanding opportunities for student choice and engagement. The next slide would be the secondary slide. Across both elementary and secondary levels, the lowest levels of agreement are on the statement, "I like going to school." At the next data summit, which is coming up shortly, and subsequent staff work sessions that follow that data summit, schools will revise instructional action plans with relevance, engagement, joyful learning as key targets. You'll see here at the secondary level, this past fall, we had a positive response rate of "I like going to school" of 39.7%, with our excellence target being 71% by year 2027. So we have some work to do in that area.
Might I suggest editing that question? Because I don't think if you ask a bunch of adolescents, do I like going to school? We're gonna, yeah.
Okay, yeah, we'll consider that. This slide reflects how elementary students perceive their ability to be heard, contribute based on 3 survey questions. My teachers really listen to me when I talk to them. Adults in this school ask students how to make the school better, and my classes really make me think. Results, as you can see here, are mixed and in some cases have flatlined, indicating that while structures exist, student voice is not yet consistently embedded in daily instruction. Here are the secondary survey results. Here, as you can see, results are similarly mixed. This suggests that instruction must continue shifting towards practices that increase student thinking, participation, and agency. Our focus is moving from student leadership as an activity at the secondary level to student voice as an instructional practice that shapes daily learning. Talk a little bit about, keep referring to this as such a drum roll, multi-tiered system of support, MTSS. See here a similar sort of structure on these non-data slides of what are our actions and what's the next level of development. And I felt like with multi-tiered system of support, it'd be important to highlight what practitioner actions are, what student actions are, and then what our next level of development is, right? So MTSS functions as the backbone of both academic and social emotional support. We've established regular MTSS collaboration in all schools and aligned this work with equity-focused professional learning. Data summits have been held across all schools with intensified focus at the high school, where we brought together 9th and 10th grade core subject area teachers to look at data and strengthen core instruction. Our next step is improving the quality of MTSS work sessions, specifically around how data is used to make instructional decisions, not just to identify problems. So we can continue to work on our districts. Oh, and we continue to work on our new data system in the district, Synergy Analytics, so that we can strengthen data-driven improvement in our practices. Synergy Analytics has been under development, was seeded, was it about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago? And since then is continuously being developed. It's not easy to develop a digitally based, cloud-based data system that holds a lot of a variety of data sets. And our districts growing that on their own. And it does take some time, and we're already seeing quite a bit of excitement and increased use around Synergy Analytics, looking at attendance data, discipline data, demographics, academic outcomes, etc. Denise, what am I missing?
As a part of this, each of our buildings has a tier 1 team, tier 2 team, and tier 3 team. The tier 1 team is looking at big buckets of data, similar to what Dr. Katsuda has been sharing with you, and making moves to impact the whole school when it comes to climate and culture, academics, and attendance. All of our buildings also have tier 2 teams, which are looking at smaller groups. So again, I had used the example of kindergarten attendance. That could be a data point that one building looks at and says, hey, we're recognizing one of our grade levels has lower attendance than everybody else. What can we do to help inform parents, share information so that we can increase that? They're also looking at groups of students based on need that might be coming up. And then they have tier 3 teams that are really looking at individual student needs. So as a part of the data summits, most, if not all of our building teams looked at their perception survey data, and they recognized kind of some focal groups of, wow, if we looked at our Native Pacific Islander students and how they're responding to how they feel connected to the school, if they were having results that were lower than expected, then buildings made specific action steps around a certain group of students to help to really bolster up how they were feeling in the school. So it's continual work, it's perpetual work, and our buildings are really digging into it and trying to make a difference for our students based on data.
Thank you. All right, goal 4, ensuring equitable access to high quality academics. You'll see in this slide reflects language arts, specifically STAR reading in grades 4 through 11. I'll highlight again, there's a percentage in the left-hand side here, 36.9. That is the aggregate across all grade levels 4 through 11. And then you can see the specific data points for each grade level here, right, within the bars. And then the excellence target that we'd like to reach by 2027 is 50.5% or higher, right? Currently, let's see here, comparison across the last 3 assessment windows, as you can look at the various colored bars here, show limited progress. These results reflect that instructional practices have not yet produced the level of growth needed to close earlier learning gaps. The idea is we accelerate learning to support students, and if they've had earlier learning gaps, in order to accelerate learning so that to support them in meeting grade level standards. Our strategy cannot be remediation alone. Sometimes folks think logically, well, let's put them in some sort of intervention program if they're significantly below grade level. But when you have this proportion of students who are not at grade level, it actually points to the strength of what we call core instruction. What approaches are we using grade level content? What pedagogical approaches are we using to support students in engaging with the content and skill development, right? So really the theory of action and research shows that it really is about improving core instruction when you are seeing data reflective of these percentages. Okay, so hold on to your seats. You see here the same data, but this time grades 3 through 12. I've disaggregated it by student groups, race and ethnicity, and service level, English language development, and students who are receiving special education services. I wanted to highlight a few significant points. So you'll see some percentages here reflective of this past fall STAR reading assessment. We compare it to fall reading assessment in 2024-25 school year. So you'll see here all students grade 3 through 12, the aggregate of students at grade level was 37.12 this past fall. This aggregate is 6.12% higher than it was last year, as compared to last year, right? So I'm going to kind of go through each of these groups and provide you with a little bit of information that shows the difference or the growth or the change in percentage from last year to this year. I didn't get this second set of data in time to sort of put it into the graph, so I'm just going to share a few points with you here. Let's see, American Indian Alaskan Native, you see here at 17.64. In year 2024-25, that was 34%. So it actually went down about 17%, 18%. Asian, you see here as reflective of 43.24%. Last year it was 41%, so it went up. Black African American, 22%, or you see here it reflected as 23.6%. Last year is 22%, so it went up 2% or so. Hispanic Latino is 27.62%. Last year it was 22%, so it went up 5.62%. Multiracial, you see here is 48.61%. Last year it was 33%, so it's increased over 15%. All the other groups as well, a significant increase. Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders increased from 13%, increased by 8.59% to 21.59%. Right? So I'll say overall, aside from American Indian Alaskan Native, which dramatically decreased, and when I look at the end of that, there were 6 students. So when you have just 6 students, the data is fairly volatile and not always showing a trend that we typically think of as a trend, right? One student can make a difference of 20%, right? So, but overall, across all groups, aside from American Indian and Alaskan Native, there have been increases in percentage of students meeting grade level standard at the STAR benchmark. And again, even as we talk about the increase in students disaggregated in this manner, meeting grade level benchmarks, the percentages are still significantly lower than they should be in order for us to reach our Roadmap 27 excellence targets, and reinforces the need for stronger differentiated instruction, culturally responsive instruction, improved core instructional practices, right? And again, we're going back to our professional learning communities, MTSS, and our professional learning as levers in changing those practices. Are there any questions before I move on? That was a lot of data. In mathematics, 21.8% of students are meeting standards in grades 4 through 11, as indicated by the STAR math fall reading math assessment. That makes this the lowest performing academic indicator on the dashboard. Math performance lags behind reading, which we believe reflects both curriculum alignment issues and inconsistent instructional practices. PLC work is now focused on improving formative assessment use and instructional decision-making rather than pacing alone. And the theory is that will also provide some supports or that will promote improvement in math instruction. Again, 2025-26 Fall STAR Math Assessment, grades 3 through 12, disaggregated is reflected here. And again, all groups across the board increased between 3.2 to 15.53% just by group. I'm not going to list them all because it's a lot. And so that is a positive thing that we're seeing some significant increases in the percentage of students meeting benchmark across the disaggregation. And although we see those increases across almost all groups, proficiency remains far below desired levels. And again, these results underscore the urgency of improving core instructional practice to ensure more students reach grade level expectations. High functioning PLCs are central improvement strategy for strengthening teaching and learning. We have clarified expectations this year, and we continue to clarify expectations around and supports for improving PLC practices to ensure PLCs remain focused on student learning rather than operational tasks. Our next phase is strengthening data literacy so teachers use evidence of learning to adjust instruction in real time. So you see here under the actions, the start of this year, there was a significant amount of work in refreshing the purpose, expectations, and routines of PLCs. Currently, there is observation and feedback provided to PLCs in terms of their functionality and their focus on instruction. Through our professional learning, there is identification and implementation of culturally and linguistically responsive instruction and other high leverage practices. Right. Again, our next level of development is really considering the use of valid measures of learning to examine and change and improve the practices that we are seeing. Yeah.
Dr. Katsuda, there's a question from Director Harden.
Director Harden, yeah.
For one question was on the benchmarks. We were at 23.6, I believe it was, for all students.
Yes.
What was it before? 23.25. What was it before? Because you said there was growth in all of them. It was 21.8 the last time.
Are we looking at math?
Because you said there was growth in all the demographics. So go this slide. So it's 23.25 for all students in grades.
All
And you said
students.
there was, yeah. And you said there was growth in all the different ethnic
Yes.
backgrounds.
Yes.
What was the growth of all students?
Go back one slide.
What was it before?
So this
Do we have that data?
I think it's right there on the left with the overall.
the overall is 21.8.
Sorry, I was looking at the chart, not the step in.
Here.
Right
Yes,
there.
that's right. So 19 last year. In
Okay,
February,
19
and then 23%.
23.5. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Let's hear. Okay, lots of data points, trying to keep it all straight here. So this slide reflects goal 5, preparing every student for their future, and specifically focuses on 9th grade on track. And just to refresh information, 9th grade on track is indicative of students earning 6 credits by the end of the school year, right? Currently, our fall monitoring shows that 77.4% of 9th grade students are on track. Though the high school had a slightly lower number, I've been working with Principal Miller on this. And then I worked at the district level and looked at some other additional data, and there was some cleanup or something. So there are a couple of numbers that are slightly different. I opted to select 77.4 because that seems to me the direction we're going, and it wasn't much different, but like 1%. currently, that is the figure we have, which is similar to last fall's results. This is a critical leading indicator for graduation outcomes and highlights the importance of strong transitions from middle school to high school. Our target is to increase this percentage to at least 83.7 by the end of this school year in order to remain on track towards the 2027 excellence target of 90%. I'll say that response to the ninth grade on track marker, our focus has been strengthening 8th through 9th grade transition supports, clarifying academic pathways, and ensuring students and families understand what it means to be on track. Part of this is really underscoring the idea that education has a driving purpose, which is very much reflected in the profile of a graduate. Profile of a graduate defines the skills that students need beyond credits and distributes responsibility for that vision across all grade level educators. We are engaged in a pilot, as you've been hearing in the updates, superintendent updates, and we aim for the pilot to work to gain traction and excitement as the year progresses, and plan to share and showcase their work before growing implementation across all schools next year. This year, again, we just actually had a profile of a graduate work session last week. It was very, very productive. Teams from all the schools came together to continue to work on their identified pilot project, where they're embedding profile of a graduate instructional practices that promote the competencies into their instruction. And so that's been exciting and holds a lot of potential, not only for our students, but also for our educators who left that session, I believe, feeling pretty positive and inspired, right? I just wanted to also point out that the graduation data for 2024-25 school year is pending state validation. And so I've decided to capture all of the state data in the next update that we'll be providing to you. That'll include OSAS assessments, as well as the graduation, the 4-year graduation rate and 5-year completion rate. So that concludes the fall board report for Roadmap 27, and welcome any other questions you may have.
Board members, if you have a question, I think it's just a matter of waving and shouting it out. You're all good? That was really, really something too. And I really appreciate getting the materials ahead of time, but it makes so much more sense. And the fact that you had to remind me aggregate, 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 and the definition of that. And that's the piece that bothers me, I guess, the most, because sometimes this data just gets out there and it's in this format and people are like, well, what's happening? We're not seeing the kind of growth that, we know that staff and teachers are putting into this. So where is it? But that's not, it's not a luxury of having all of it presented, right, when it's being used in a particular way throughout the system. So I don't know what the answers to those questions are, other than the opportunity to ask you questions and dig into it further and make sure that we understand when we have questions that we have people to come to and ask.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of the way I feel about it. So we good, everyone, to move forward? Because we're just about ready to, Director Southerton, I know that you are going to be working with us on the 2020 capital bond financing update, which is the second report. And we do have our guest with us as well. Board members, are we all ready to go, or does anyone need a 5-minute? Because Director Southerton, we're going to be in this for what, a half hour or so?
Yeah, I'd say 20 minutes with, another 10 minutes potentially for Q&A.
Okay, so board members, are we good? Everybody All right. If you don't, turn off your camera and run. That's the way it works. All right. Take it away, Director Southerton.
Great. Thank you, Chair Shields and board. I will read a little bit from David's bio, do a little introduction here. So David, hope your bio is up to date. David Williams is a director in the public finance group at Piper Sandler, where he focuses on advising school districts, education service districts, and community college, cities, counties, and other local governments. Issuers on both short-term and long-term financial strategies. Piper Sandler has been a longtime partner with Centennial, and he's here to provide us an update on the 2020 general obligation bonds and an opportunity for the school board to consider in the regards to the repayment plan. But David, I will pass it off to you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Paul. Thank you all for having me on tonight. Appreciate tolerating moving me around in your agenda. I had to do a quick airport run, and at first I thought, oh, brilliant, I'll do the airport run and swing by the district and join the board meeting. Paul said, no, we're online. Okay, well, I got to get home then and get online. But thank you all for that. I'm gonna share my screen. Somebody give me a thumbs up that y'all can see that just fine. Perfect. Excellent. Thank you. As Paul said, Piper Sandler, we are your financial consultants on kind of all things debt related. Our big piece, of course, is helping districts with their general obligation bond work that they do. We have been a longtime partner to the school district, as we have been with many districts in the state. My colleague Carol Samuels has worked with the district for many years. Her bio reads back 35 years in this work, and I'm happy to continue that relationship with you all. So Paul reached out to us and said, hey, David, we might have some timing things we need to work on, because if we look back at our 2020 bonds, we know we built a little step, little being an operative word. We built a little step in there so that maybe we can come in and layer some additional capital funding in on top of that to continue to do good investments in the district. And he told me a date, and I said, hang on, let me look at your debt profile. And it turns out the date was not the date that y'all are trucking for. So that presents a challenge, but some opportunity. And there are some definite silver linings to that. So what I want to walk you through today is essentially a possibility for you all to refinance a little bit of debt from your existing bonds, kind of bring it forward in time, pay some of it back sooner, achieve cash flow savings from that debt, which would otherwise have carried interest out longer, and set you all up for the timeline that you are currently working towards to have that conversation with your community about investment. And then I'll paint some additional silver linings as we go through that. Okay, so you all know who you are, Centennial School District. Great. The first thing we like to do when we talk about debt, or we don't necessarily like to do, but we need to do, is couch it in the frame of interest rates. I am 51, so this could also be my EKG. But what we're looking at here is two different lines on here. So the black line and the blue line. Black line is taxable interest rates. They're generally always a little bit higher than tax-exempt interest rates, which is the blue line. And you notice they mostly move in tandem. The spikes are generally aligned. Obviously, this giant trough here down at the bottom in 2020 was brilliant. And people who borrowed debt in 2020 are absolutely brilliant. Hint, hint. Great interest rates there. Definitely good borrowing. However, most districts don't time their borrowing for when interest rates rise and falls. They time it for when the needs rise and fall. Right now, we're, of course, a little bit higher than that, but we're not historically high. We're just sort of temporarily high. Don't ask me to predict where interest rates will go. If I could do that, I probably would be doing something more lucrative than this. All right, the other piece we want to talk about is property value, and this is where a little bit of silver lining comes into play. based on your current conversation of timeline. Because obviously your tax base is the base on which you will levy a fixed amount of debt service in order to generate a repayment, right? So the more tax base you have, the lower the received levy rate by the taxpayer, or conversely, the sort of higher amount you can borrow or tolerate in a debt service payment at a targeted levy rate. You can see that's this magic number here, this $3.8 billion. Your real market value at almost 7.3 billion is quite robust, but obviously your assessed value being 50% of that is the real target here. If you want a seminar on property taxes and why these two things don't line up, I'm happy to do that another day. It is a long and winding road, that's for sure. The other key thing on this table here is my column on the far right, which is AV growth. And this is important because generally when we build out debt profiles, for instance, when you sold your 2020 bonds, we build it out on, we like to use a conservative estimate of growth in AV. So that way you can maintain a level levy rate over time. You have to assume a growth rate. We generally assume a 3% growth rate. That is the constitutional allowable growth rate for existing property. And there are other valid reasons by maintaining that. But if you have a growth rate that exceeds 3%, therefore, what's going to happen is you'll have a steadily declining levy rate, right? Your fixed debt service now spread over a slightly bigger base year over year. If conversely that growth rate was less than 3%, you would have a steadily inclining levy rate, right? So you have a nice problem in that you are growing faster than 3%, therefore you have a steadily declining levy rate, which will over time create additional capacity. However, it means the tax rate today that taxpayers are paying on your existing debt is not what we originally projected when we sold that debt. That's, of course, this 2020 issuance, $61 million, which will mature in 2050. So this is all of that kind of broken out. And you can see this blue line in the middle is today, your taxpayers today. On the ballot, you estimated $1.19. Taxpayers are paying $1.09 now. So because of that growth, that fixed debt service is being spread more broadly on that tax base, which gives that space. Now, 10 cents is not a huge gap, right? That's not a significant, it is significant, it's statistically, but it's not a measurable amount there. But it was always built that you can see if you cheat and look ahead, you can see that you're projected to drop to 83 cents in 2028. Let's put that in graph form. That's this beauty here, which is way easier to see and figure out. So you can see you have this last high year in 27 and a low rate then starting in 2028. Well, what that means is in an ideal world, you would be on the ballot in fiscal 27. Well, if you're doing calendar math in your head, that means you would need to be on the ballot in November or May of 27. So as I understand your planning and timeline, that is aggressive. And that's the district is not ready for that conversation yet with the community. But there is an interest in making sure that we're sort of keeping faith with that $1.19 and using sort of best practices to make sure we're tapping the resources of the community in alignment with that original ballot title, right? So what can we do? So what I'm going to walk through is a couple of refinancing scenarios that we've produced for the district. And then we've done a little thought exercise to give you a sense of down the road, what would that mean in possible new money? Hint, it's not $60 million. This will be a small bond, but an opportunity to make small investments and leverage the awesome state matching grant. Awesome state matching grant. Okay, so let's look at the first one in graphical form, right? So in this first refunding scenario, we say, let's just jump 1 year ahead of time. Let's reestablish the $1.19 levy rate, and let's jump 1 year ahead of time. Therefore, you would be projected to be on the ballot in fiscal 28. So that is November of 27, which by the way is a non-election, or May of 28, which is a general primary election, right? So fiscal 28. Passing in that year, then you would be able to take advantage of this new delayed step space out here. So what you see on this chart here is where we fill in. So these orange blocks are the new added debt service payments from the refinancing. And that almost comes entirely from this little spot down here in 2050, right? So we're going to take debt that you are carrying out to 2050, and we're going to repay it back in the next 2 years in an accelerated manner, which gives you that reestablishment here. It also, because this debt out here doesn't just sit here forever, it has little bitty interest payments all along every single year. And that's this barely sliver on top of each of these. So you save all of that little bit all the way along, and then this chunk at the very end, bring it up to the next 2 years and pay it off, right? Okay, so this is a type of refinancing that we use. You'll see the word at the top, refunding. Refunding is just our fancy word for refinancing. But in a refunding, there are two kinds. There is what's called a taxable advance refunding, which is what this is. And then there is a current refunding. So when you sold bonds in 2020, almost all debt sold in the public marketplace carries with it a 10-year call provision. So the bonds essentially from year 1 to year 10 cannot be refunded. You can't, there's no prepayment, right? Unlike say a mortgage that has no prepayment penalty at all and you can, pay it off anytime you want. This does have prepayment. You are a limit, and the limit is you can't, right? So you have to carry that first 10 years. It's a little bit of a balance in the marketplace where people are going to invest in you and buy your bonds. They want to know they're going to make money for a little bit of time. So that's how the standard has developed in the marketplace. But everything in year 11 on out is all callable. So you can refund that, right? We can dig into that and refinance it. But when you are refinancing before the call date, so this debt you originally issued is tax exempt debt, and that you don't pay tax. Well, you all pay taxes individually. The district doesn't pay taxes, right? What it means is the investor, the person who bought the bonds, is not paying income tax on the interest you're paying them. So that was what we mean by tax exempt. So in exchange, they give you a little lower interest rate for it, right? Well, because we're paying that, we're doing this before we hit that call date, which is in 2030. By law, we have to do it as a taxable refinancing. So we don't exchange a tax exempt rate for a tax exempt rate. We're exchanging a tax exempt rate for a taxable rate. Now, if you remember at the start, that chart where tax exempt rates are higher than taxable rates. So that's the inherent challenge when you do this. But it does give you this opportunity to restructure your debt service to align with the conversations you're having and the planning work you're doing. So this one, let's call this the short refunding, right? So we're taking a little bit out of the back end and we're just doing the next 2 years. This one has the good and the bad. The bad part in it is on a net present value. So that is a calculation that takes into account the time value of money. Essentially, the dollar in 2050 is worth a lot less than it is now. So the debt market wants you to leave it in 2050. They don't want you to bring it forward. So time value money says this is not great. This has a net present value loss of just about 3%, right? Okay. However, it has, let me scroll down, it has a cash, actual dollar savings of 1.4 million, just under $1.5 million in cash savings. So that's actual dollars you won't pay. Again, net present value wants to deflate the value of that dollar now compared to later compared to now, right? but you can see the cash savings. So on this table, the way to look at it is at the very top here, you have these 2 years with negatives. These are dis savings because we're making higher debt service payments in these first 2 years. That's where we're putting this new debt service. But then every year for the next 35, not 35, the next 25 years, you're saving 80,000. So that's the interest payment you were going to be paying. And then you save the 1.68 on the actual debt service payment in that final year. So cash savings of 1.5, net present value, a slight loss of $65,000, right? So that's the short one. That would set you up for May 27, did I say this right? I always get lost in these election cycles.
May 28.
May 28 election, right? However, there is also a high stakes game here to be played where if you pass in May 28, yay, fantastic. We come in and we layer in a new debt service structure based on the amount you ask. If you don't, however, the drop happens and you have to go back to the drawing board and there's not time to fill in an additional year. So Paul asked us to look at what if we filled in for 3 years? Now, we do that, you still have opportunities. I think the goal would still to be targeting the May 28 ballot conversation. And there are tools we can then implement to sort of jump the fence. So let me show you what an additional year of refunding looks like. And it has a slight silver lining to it as well. So this looks oddly similar to what we just showed you. However, it has one more year filled in, right? These little boxes on top are just slightly bigger than you saw before. And this chunk out of 2050 is also slightly bigger than you saw before. So that gives you a little bit of flexibility as you head into fiscal 28, where you're not playing the high stakes sort of do or die May 28 ballot. Okay. Now, I'll show you what that means on subsequent bond issuance, but for this purpose, you get some added extra benefit. In our world, we call it as a little more juice in adding that additional year of fill in or a little bit more of the out year bonds. And what that means is you can see the net present value loss drops to only 30,000 and under 8%. I'm a cautiously optimistic guy, so I like to be optimistic. It's in a decent world where interest rates continue to soften. This might be zero or very slightly positive by the time we actually place this issue and sell this refunding bond. So let me show you in a savings parameter that then jumps by more than $1 million, about $1.4 million, to a $2.8 million cash savings. So you can see it gets measurably better. We're bringing long-term debt, putting it into kind of a sweet spot in the curve, having a little bit more volume in the refunding begins to overwhelm. The primary driver in the short refunding that is sort of costing you is cost of issuance, because it's not just transferring the debt, right? Their bond counsel will be paid, we will be paid, a municipal advisor has to be paid as part of an advanced refunding process. So adding more par amount brings it in, begins to overwhelm those costs of issuance with the savings on that debt, right? So that's why you're getting a little better NPV on this and significantly better cash savings. Okay. So then the question would always come up, okay, so, but like thought exercise, what does that mean when we begin to think about a May 2028 election and potential bond? Well, again, I said it's not 60 million. So we baked in a couple of scenarios here to show you capacity. Now, I want to caution a couple of pieces on this. One, don't get wedded to the $500,000 increment. There are fundamentals that will change as we move forward in time. One of the biggest is this thing down here. So because we are naturally cautious, we like to underpromise and overdeliver. Looking this far out, we put a fairly healthy cushion on current interest rates just to hedge. So as we move forward in time in your planning, we begin to lower that cushion on interest rates, begins to get a bit more precise on what you would be able to raise. That's why I say, hey, if you're like 10 years and about 14 million is the right number, great. Work from there. It might be 14 and a half. It might be 13 and a half, depending on what happens in interest rates, but don't get wedded to the $500,000 increment, right? So we said maintain $1.19. So we do the refunding, continue the $1.19 on out for either 10 years or 20 years. At 10 years, that will tolerate a borrowing amount of about $14 million. And for 20 years, a borrowing amount of just under $24 million. For reference, Paul will shake his head yes or no. I think I remember this correctly. The awesome match that you're eligible for is $10.2 million. Am I have that right, Paul?
You do, yeah, that's
Yeah,
correct for this biennium.
for this biennium. So dollar for dollar, you'd be eligible for up to $10.2 million. So for instance, if you went for a 10-year, $14 million bond, you would have project fund at the end of the day of $24 million, right? Or $34 million on the 20-year bond. So does that make sense? Yeah. So this is the thought exercise of what would it look like layered on top of that. These are that in graph form, just because we like to show it. Very simple. Obviously, the idea here is you layer in a smaller, you can't do maintenance with a bond, but let's call it a maintenance bond. You layer in the smaller bond here in this little drop. We move forward a time. It gets us meaningfully closer to the point at which all your debt falls off the table. It also gets us past that call date. So let's say you went with the 10-year approach. You or your successors, or certainly Paul and I, in about 7 years, will probably sit down and begin to talk about, okay, what are we thinking about for the 2037 November or May 2038 election? And you'll begin to layer on and possibly do a current refunding because interest rates will be down to 3% by then, I'm sure. And we can carve out some space here, and then we can begin to wrap debt around the waterfall off at the end of here, giving the district much more capacity at that point in time, right? So that's just in a 10-year, and this is that obviously in a 20-year takes you all the way towards the end of your current issuance. So that was a lot in a short period of time. Happy to answer any questions you might have about this.
Okay, good hands. I see good hands up. So I didn't see who went first. So Will, we'll start with you, and then Jess, you're right after that. So watch each other.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, David, for this presentation. It's definitely a lot to take in. I look forward to digesting it a little bit more deeper and then probably coming back with some other questions.
Yep.
And briefly, I just wanted to jokingly mention that as a realtor in the group, please don't say things out loud like interest rates will be back at 3%. That's a dangerous thing to say in my world.
Yes,
but-
I'm not predicting interest
Okay,
rates
thank you,
at
thank you.
all.
Thank you for clarifying that it's not a prediction, yes. But to this report and to kind of this refinancing of things we're talking about, are we talking about reducing total interest paid or really just kind of lowering payments to extend the debt and ask for this replacement bond? Am I tracking with kind of where things are going?
So there's two things, right? So the refunding serves two purposes. One, it lowers actual interest paid. That's
Okay.
lowering this number here for the existing 2020 debt, right? So you are lowering interest there. The other thing it does is it takes advantage of that space that has grown in your levy rate as a result of that growth to do that, right? So had you not grown at 3% and your levy rate was at $1.19 right now, you probably wouldn't be having this conversation because you didn't have that gap begin to grow. So in the conversation is generally when you were on the ballot in 2020, you projected $1.19 levy rate. That's the That's the faith. I hesitate to use the word promise because voters do not actually approve a levy rate on the ballot title, even though it is included as information. But that's the faith you want to keep with the voters, is that $1.19 for the investment. So you have, because of growth, you have an opportunity to refinance, save interest, fill in to keep at that $1.19 levy rate, and set the district up a year later than was originally designed by the 2020 for a space in with which you would then return to the voters to have another conversation about an additional bond in that space. That second bond, the 14 million and 24 million we're talking about, those are what you would call new money bonds. Those would not impact the 2020s. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It does, yeah.
I'll add, at the risk of being out of my depth here, I think part of the issue that we look at, and it might be similar to real estate and folks that maybe purchased a home, a lot of folks will look at the payment and say, that's how much home I can afford, right? And that's similar to what we do when we go out for a bond. We look at the payment or the mill rate, and that's how much we can borrow at the interest rate. And part of that is what will the assessed value increase over the life of the debt to incorporate what we can then, borrow, and essentially what the community, the debt payments that the community agrees to take on. And with a conservative approach of a 3% growth rate, we essentially indebted the community, the district, out till 2050, because that's what we thought had to fit within that $1.19. Now, having the hindsight and the benefit of moving forward, we know that we could have paid that debt a year earlier, a little bit, some of it earlier, right? So we're saving those interest payments, and we're essentially paying the debt that they approved earlier, because we have the capacity within the payment amount that we, again, didn't promise per David, but that we shared would be what we thought would be likely. So they're saving interest, not paying any more money than what we shared on a mill rate, on a property tax basis, and we're paying off the debt sooner. We're on indebting the district sooner. We're paying that off. So ultimately, it's a in my mind a smart fiscal decision and responsible decision to pay off debt earlier if you can, and save those interest payments and not carry that debt longer.
Thank you, Paul. So from tracking, we're changing, we're slightly changing timing of payments, but the long-term trade-off on that is that our debt capacity will be stronger, in the way that we go out and ask for a replacement bond. Is that right? Am I tracking that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, this is my turn. All right, so I'm not familiar with terms very well. I know just enough to be dangerous. So follow me here. What are we running as a risk if we do not refinance these? What are the repercussions of not refunding these?
That's a great question. Thank you. Let me just show the chart. You're not to say you're running something at risk is probably, using the term risk is probably not the right term, right? So if you just stayed where you're at, imagine these orange bars didn't exist, right? You have projected to have a slight decrease in your fiscal 27 bond, right? In the levy rate payment, the levy rates. And then you have a step down. It's about a 15-cent, 20-cent step down in fiscal 28. And then assuming 3% flat growth, which is, whatever, you would have this level levy from here until 2050 and fill this back in, right? So that would not come out. So the risk is probably the question of let's play this forward. The risk is political, and the risk is if you don't do this here, yet you still say you want to be on the ballot in May of 28, it means you're on the ballot having conversations with the voters about something that would very clearly be increasing their current levy rate, right? Because you will have experienced the drop. Let me go up to the baseline.
Mhm.
Baseline.
The drop is in 2028.
The drop is in 2028, exactly. So in May of 28, taxpayers will have already had the drop. It will have happened, right?
Okay.
And so you would be on, let me get this little guy here. You'd be on the ballot here, right? And if it got voted on, or rather, you would be proposing a new bond that would be filling in like this, right? So it would be one level, drop down to 84 cents, and you'd be asking to go back up to $1.19 in on that ballot, right? So the traditionally the common wisdom is, as long as it is a cash savings, there's value in going ahead and filling in that space, utilizing that capacity, as Paul said. Had you had this plan from the start, you would use that debt capacity. You would not have had that drop, right? And therefore, it would have made the total indebtedness slightly cheaper. And so you're just, let's make it slightly cheaper now by pulling that money forward and paying it off. And that allows you in May of 28 to have the conversation with the voters about a continuation levy. Hey, we want to continue at what we have been doing since we were on the ballot in 2020, which is $1.19, right?
Yep. And this refunding would cost us $4 million.
The refunding is actually a money saver, right? The short
In the
one.
long term.
No, in the long term, it's a cash saver. It has, again, so in finance, we use this net present value calculation, and we are required to use it. And that's this loss of 0.84% or 30 grand in lost net present value. So that's the present value today of that dollar I would be paying in 2050, right? So I got to devalue it when I bring it to today. So it's a net loss. In a cash savings, it saves total 2.82 million. On this table where we've got a bunch of numbers on here, a couple of things that are key to point out is basically we are refunding $3 million, $3.025 million of bonds, of your current bonds. We're going to refinance 3 million of that into, and it's actually a $3.5 million bond par amount that you borrow to replace it with, again, because of net present value. But I'm trading out a 5% interest rate on that bond in 2050, and I'm turning it into a 4% interest rate today, right? So that's the trade that saves you that interest over time, both paying it early and trading a 5% for a 4%, right? So if you do this refinancing, the district writes no check, right? It all happens in the refinancing process. The providers get paid out of that. It's about, let's call it, say, $100,000 in total cost of issuance between there are basically three primary providers involved in any bonding process. About 100,000 in that. And all of that happens during the transaction. The district writes no check involved there. Now, why wouldn't I come and always propose? Why don't we just do this all the time, right? Well, because there are spots in the curve that don't make sense, right? One, I would like this to be a break-even number or a positive number, right? If I was just looking for refinancings to come talk to you about, I wouldn't initially flag this. But you have other goals and objectives you want to accomplish, such as maintaining that $1.19 levy rate as you head into another conversation with your community, right? So there is that goal. Now, if Paul came to me and said, we want to do this, and it showed me a negative here, and then I come down here and this was a negative number, because that does happen, right? I'd be like, yeah, that we're not doing that, right? Like, if I took all of your remaining debt, that's not on this table, but if I took all your remaining debt and refinanced it all into taxable, because I could do that, I could take the whole thing and just create a whole new series out of it, it would be a cash loser and a net present value loser, which is why nobody's going to talk to you about it, right? So there are certain things we look for before I would want to jump in, right? Cash savings being strong, getting closer to break even. When we were looking at the short one and it's a 3% loss, I'm starting to feel pretty nervous about that. This one getting to a break even point from a net present value, just from a finance perspective, makes me feel better. And then add on the cash savings on top of that, right?
Thank
Yeah,
you.
our community would save $2.8 million in interest payments, pay off debt a little bit earlier, and stay with the $1.19 levy rate that I know
Yes.
we didn't promise, but we represented in the ballot language. So it's in line with all our values and everything we've communicated to our community, and we're saving $2.8 million worth of interest over the time. I look at it again, the house analogy. If you paid off your house a little bit early, we're paying out a portion of the house early and saving that interest because we have the capacity within the communicated, not promised, but communicated levy amount of $1.19.
I love that, Paul. Here's the analogy. You bought a house and you said, I'm willing to devote 20% of my income to my mortgage payment. You got 4 years into it and your actual cash payment was down to about 15% of your income. And you said, you know what, for the next couple of years, let me run it. Let me make some extra payments, truing up to that 5%, that extra 5%. Keep paying 20% for the next 2 years. And then maybe I can afford, this is a terrible analogy. This is where it falls apart. The vacation home. Maybe I can afford to do the remodel. Maybe that's the more apt, right? And I can then take out my equity line and layer it on top in that 5% because I've now got capacity because my income has grown. That's probably a much better analogy way to think about it.
And we're presenting this information tonight as an opportunity and information. There's no decision. There's no, action on the board agenda for today. This is obviously a large and complex decision. So we wanted to socialize it with the board well in advance of any consideration of approving any action. So no action this evening, just information.
I'll add, though, that it's information that we're going to need because we're going to be parallel with our strategic planning for facility planning in the future. And so it is going to have impact on what we will ultimately be asking our community for. And Jess and I remember back in the days, 2016, the 2020 bond work that we did and how you bring your community on. And the selling point was high, which of you're maintaining. We're not going to ask anything more of you, but we are please asking you to maintain and not, I'm just going to say it kind of plainly, I guess, not allowing that that dip in October that we all see, or maybe it would be a dip, right? Depending on which year, because we all have that hit in October of what our taxes are. And allowing our community to experience it going down and then coming back out the next year and saying, but we really want you to put it back up there, is a little bit harder sell than that sell of just, can we maintain what we've been doing? And we learned that when we went out and did this. It gives us some time to look and be realistic as well with our long range facility planning, because you know how that comes out. It comes out with, gosh, there's so many things that we need, and there's so many things that we want. And sometimes we have to look at the wants versus the needs and plan accordingly for that and see how we can finance that with future bonds. So there's a lot to it. And I don't know, Superintendent Owens, I'm not sure how many people we have signed up to go to the bond conference that OSBA is putting together, but I know that that's an important part of this too, in terms of understanding. This gets us started with this thought process.
Yep, we've got Director Newman and Vice Chair Mooring from the board scheduled to go.
Excellent. Yay. Other board members, though, with questions before we let David relax in this evening. Appreciate you coming in this evening.
My pleasure.
This way and helping us. And it is going to be something that, as we sit with it, Paul is excellent at walking us through in a common sense way of understanding numbers. But it's also important for us to have seen the entire picture and sit at it for a while, so that we can come back with thoughtful questions to Paul. You can decide and discuss it, and then do we need you back, David? Help us some more. All righty. So I think, hearing nothing else from any other
Can
board
I ask one
members.
last question?
Yes, please.
How fast do we need to act? Like, what kind of timeline are we on making a decision like this?
Good question.
Is this something you're going to come back to us next meeting, or is it something that we talk about going into fall of 26?
Paul, that's in your,
Or something in between?
yeah, you need to give us some timelines, Paul and David.
Yeah, I'd say if we don't want the mill rate to drop, then we would be looking for the board to consider authorizing this by the end of February, early March, kind of at the latest, so that we can incorporate that in the budget documents and in our forms that we file with the county tax collector offices. And that has to be done, right in June. So that's the opportunity there, or the timeline. Conversely, you could potentially, as a board, determine if you want to move up the ballot measure, which would be difficult to try and get it on November 26th or May 27. But that would be another opportunity. As Chair Shields said, when the mill rate drops, because it is, no action would mean the mill rate would drop down to 80 cents. Nobody can tell the future, but you can look at the past and you can see when our mill rate dropped, it was well above $2 at one point in time in our district. And it dropped to around 2010, 2012. And, we didn't pass a bond for 20 years, right? And we went out several times to voters. And the only time that it passed is 2020, when we could go to voters and say, without increasing your levy, you can approve this money to make the investment in our facilities for our students, right? And so it would be, I would imagine, very difficult to go out in 2028 or later and ask them to go back up to 119 after they've dropped to 83. It would be similar to what we tried to do from 2012 on and we're never successful with. And so, that's why we're bringing this forward to you all today. We know that there are needs of our facilities for our students, for our staff. We know that we have an obligation to protect our buildings and invest in our buildings and take care of the assets the community is paid for. And to do that, we need to make sure that we have a levy rate that supports the capital investment that is needed. So a little bit longer answer to your short question, Director Harden, but is that helpful to round out the information and timeline and the reason behind it?
Yeah, that's great. I just want to know how quick I need to ask for a tutorial on all this stuff.
Yeah. And David has made himself very much available, so I'm sure I'll volunteer him, but I'm sure he's willing to come back at the February meeting.
Yep.
If we'd like him.
Anytime.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. So what we're going to do, we are at the superintendent report in our agenda. Superintendent Owens, do you want us to persevere or do we take a quick break?
Up to you. It's a relatively brief report.
Well,
I
then
see
let's go.
Vice Chair Mooring saying soldier on is how I interpreted that. All right, greetings, board members. It's my pleasure and privilege to share with you this update about happenings in our school district. On January 21st, the district convened the second of 5 Profile of a Centennial Graduate pilot leader work sessions, continuing cross-district collaboration among teacher leaders and school administrators focused on aligning instructional practices to the profile of graduate learning progressions and co-designing supports for future scale. This session built on the initial work by deepening alignment between critical standards, formative assessment practices, and feedback-rich learning, while providing structured time for collaborative instructional planning. Participating educators focused on translating the academically prepared competency. As you might remember, there's 6 different main competencies in the profile of the Centennial graduate. So the academically prepared competency into classroom practice and refining instructional approaches informed by shared expectations and student evidence. A few examples of the profile of a Centennial graduate pilots in process are examination of land and water forms in grade 2 at Pal Butte Elementary to learn about the impact of earth changes. Centennial Middle School plans to start and strengthen student-led conferences. Pleasant Valley 5th grade is developing plans to support students in examining and eradicating invasive plant species via the Wild Side. And Butler Creek continued work on strengthening their career exploration unit connected with the feature that you saw at the last board meeting featuring BizTown. And those are just some examples of the work that happened that day. The series will continue with additional work sessions scheduled for February 18th, March 11th, April 29th, allowing the pilot leaders to refine instructional strategies, share evidence of practice, and prepare for a culminating student showcase later this spring, and board members will be provided more information about that at a future date. On Thursday, January 29th, board member, that's tomorrow, board member Rose Salowski, student representative to the board, Yahir Castro, Director of Business and Operations, Paul Southerton, and I plan to participate in a pre-session legislative breakfast briefing with the Multnomah County delegation of state legislators alongside Multnomah County School District superintendents, 1 board member from each school district and a student from each school district. The briefing will take place from 9:30 to 11 at the Multnomah Education Service District and is being coordinated by the district's government affairs administrator, Lisa Merrick, in collaboration with Portland Public Schools. The purpose of this briefing is to provide legislators with a coordinated regional perspective early in the legislative session, centering student voice, shared district trends, and financial realities facing Multnomah County school districts. The agenda includes student introductions, district snapshots, a plain language discussion of school finance constraints, led by Director Southerton on behalf of East County school districts, shared legislative priorities, and a dialogue with lawmakers. And those were the pictures from the legislators' websites on the state page, and they're fuzzy because they were fuzzy on that page. As a follow-up to prior communication, board members are invited to participate in a Multnomah County School District Lobby Day coordinated by the Multnomah Education Service District. The event is scheduled for Friday, February 13th from 9:30 to 3:30 with an initial meeting at the local government center in Salem. Participants will meet for breakfast, a brief orientation, and meeting preparation before walking to the Oregon State Capitol for scheduled afternoon meetings with legislators. Lunch will be provided. A registration form has been shared with the board to support planning and maintaining an accurate head count, and I plan to reshare it once again in my weekly Friday email. Last Friday, at the invitation of Multnomah County Commissioner Vince Jones-Dixon, and in coordination with Lisa Merrick, I joined superintendents from Reynolds and Gresham Barlow, along with the mayors of Wood Village and Fairview, for a tour of the Amazon robotics facility in Troutdale. The visit provided an opportunity to learn more about a major regional employer's operations, including the use of robotics and automation in logistics, workforce safety considerations, and workforce development programs. Participants also engaged in dialogue about regional collaboration and the connections between K-12 education and post-secondary pathways and local employment opportunities. This engagement supports broader relationship building with regional education and municipal leaders and contributes to shared understanding of the local economic landscape and potential future collaboration related to workforce readiness. Finally, the district was recently notified that the Centennial School District Facilities Team has been selected as a recipient of the Gresham Fire Department's 2025 Community Award for Community Risk Reduction. Centennial is one of 3 local school districts being recognized this year for collective excellence in improving life safety across school facilities. According to the Gresham Fire Department, this recognition reflects the facilities team's consistent effort, perseverance, and professionalism, as well as the strong partnership established between the district and the fire department to improve fire and life safety conditions across schools. The fire department emphasized that while resources matter, the impact is driven by people doing the work every day. The award will be formally presented at the Gresham Fire Awards ceremony on February 4th. And here on the screen, you can see a couple of photos from the fire department's Instagram page from a previous award ceremony. With that, I invite any questions or comments that you might have, and that concludes my superintendent's report.
Nicely done. Directors, questions? No, all right. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take our comfort break and then come back. Please be ready to look at the confirmation items, and then looking forward in the agenda. I want you to note that under old business, we have the policy committee. I sent out an email to all of you. I'm going to be referencing that, dated January 23rd. So if you have any questions about that email, this would be the time to pull it up and then to go ahead and have our questions asked. So it's now says 8:19 on my screen. So let's go for 8:30 and get back at it. Okay, take a break. Man, that time goes fast.
Let me know when you're ready, Pam, and I'll hit recording.
All right. Just checking to see. All right. I got proof of life from Jess. I need proof of life from Melissa, Rose, and Will. Proof of life, proof of life. Okay, good. I just don't want to miss anybody. Hey, all right, great. Thank you, board members. Back on time. I know that felt like, well, it felt like a really short break to me. So we are at that part of the agenda for confirmation items as listed. Excuse me. Unless there's a question, can I have the confirmation, a motion to?
Motion to approve the confirmation items.
Yes, thank you.
Second.
Second.
And I got everybody else seconding me. Great. So we've got the motion and the second to approve the confirmation items. It's listed. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Yay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Let's move over to section 7, board action items, old business. The policy committee, as I mentioned to you before, that information was sent out on Friday. There's a list of the policies themselves, the title of the policy. There is a list of who the facilitator is for that, and a list of other members who have expressed an interest. And all except the field trips and excursions group already has 3 members who have expressed an interest. As you know, superintendent policy review committees can't have any more than 3 participants. We've also added an administrator, which will help us in that review process. And that email indicates the facilitators in each of those. And attached were the PDFs of the current policies, with one exception, and that would be the board member compensation and expense reimbursement. There is the current one we're working under, and then the proposed one. Remember, we were kind of waiting until those questions from the ethics committee were being asked and answered. And so that committee will be actually looking at the current and the kind of proposed. Then these will come back to the superintendent because it is his policy work, and then board leadership will help review those and bring those back through to you. So unless there are any questions about the email or questions about the assignments, we can check this particular piece off of our list. And Rose, question.
Yes, timelines.
Yeah, we'd rather have it done sooner than later, and that's the challenge. Everything feels like that, doesn't it? So if you could at least have the initial meeting, like next month, then you're going to know if it's just minor things, because if it's minor, it's minor. And frankly, we know that OSBA doesn't like us making overreaching kind of reviews because of liability, legal issues. So if you could just get a meeting in February, then give us a timeline from that.
Perfect. And those of us that were put as the lead are the ones that should be scheduling that meeting and reaching out to everybody. Yeah. Perfect.
And I'm assuming everybody has everybody's emails. And so if you need any of that kind of support, Missy says that she could help us. I could certainly help you guys too. I've got all of our emails. The only one, in fact, Rose, yours would be one that we'd want to move on, because we will be going through the budget after the budget. We would be looking at the timelines, right, for the budget committee. So that might be one that's pressing us a little bit.
Okay, I'll get on it. Thank you.
Yeah. And then Melissa, yours with the evaluation procedures, if we were going to do something for like our retreat. Right. And if we wanted to have somebody come in and do something for that, more lead time would be helpful for that. But the field trips. I've been at it for how long, Principal Miller? That I said I'm going to be doing this and haven't
At least 2 years, I think.
at least 2 years exactly. So let's see how long I can keep that going. And the compensation and expense one is that's a really new one to everybody. So we don't even have a whole lot of places to go back and look because it's not been on the books that long. Although there are other districts who have been doing it for a while, and I know that committee will be interested in finding out maybe what other districts are doing as well as what we may be proposing for that. Just appreciate the extra time. I know it's going to be tough because of the other things that are going to be on our plate. All right, thank you. I'm going to cross that one off. So we're into new business, and because we're in a work session, these are going to be first reads of the policies. When we do first reads, it's good to get our questions out, because if we have all our questions answered, we'll be ready in our next meeting to just kind of move pretty quickly through it, and probably just through the approval process, unless there's something that came up in the couple of weeks in between. So our first is on policies. Is that II? Like, I know it's, for me, some of this is always difficult. IIA, IIAAR, the instructional materials, and Director Olson is going to be going over that with us. Superintendent Owens, did you need to weigh in before Director Owens gets started?
Yeah, I mean, I've always got something. So I would just say that Director Olson will competently walk us through. But what I would say before that is that last spring, Director Callahan brought this forward. What you have now is a new director and a new version. So keep in mind what was there before, but know that what you see is going to be different. And Director Olson is going to try to monitor the changes, not only in the policy itself, but then between the version that you saw before and now. So she has a little bit of a juggling act to do. Director Olson, let's see what you got.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening, board. Let me see if I can get you in a bigger grid so I can see a little bit better. Everyone see my screen? Good, good. Okay, so as Superintendent Owens said, why is it not advancing? There it goes. I'm bringing this to you. It is different. It has been revised since you saw from the spring, which was a revision from what the current policy was. So now we have two revisions. The revisions, while important in substance, are relatively easy to follow. There was a Senate bill that passed last year that amended one of the ORSs related to instructional materials. It distinguished some definitions with more clarity between classroom library, library materials, and school library. It clarified non-discrimination prohibited under the ORS, as you see there, related to the protected groups in the state, but as well as some additional racial ethnic groups, students with disability or people with disabilities, immigrants, refugees, or those that are LGBTQIA+. It also clarifies, if you'll remember, this may have been kind of a sticky point. It clarifies that the process for request for removal by people who aren't responsible for the selection or retention of library materials, it clarifies who those people are eligible to be, and I'll show you that when we have it marked up, and that the removal is not made until the written explanation has gone public. There are a lot of ARs attached to this policy. I've linked here for your information, and so that you could have previewed it in advance. But I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint in a while and just go straight through kind of the working documents. You'll see, though, that we have the current adopted policy. it is wholesale differently organized than the proposed one. So I didn't do your traditional kind of markup that you're used to seeing. I've included the proposed deleted, which isn't really applicable to us because we didn't adopt that one in the spring. And then I will walk you through the new proposed review as well as the 6 ARs that accompany it. One of the items that I think I remember hearing when I rewatched the board meeting where Director Callahan brought this to you last spring was related to kind of the flow of the different types of instructional materials, who is responsible for selecting them, who does the reconsideration request, who is that directed to, who makes the final or the decision based on the reconsideration request, and then who makes is the appeal to and makes that final decision based on the appeal. The ones that are in asterisks are decision points in the policy recommended, and we will show you through the typical strikeout what our recommendation is, but the recommendations are as on this chart. One other clarification is that the appeal decision is based on whether the correct procedure was followed only, and not the merit of the decision to sustain or remove the instructional material. So you can see that the core materials are selected by the board or are approved by the board, and therefore the reconsideration would go to the superintendent. The decision would be in the purview of the board ultimately, and for these there would then be no appeal. The other items, supplemental materials, school library and classroom library, are selected by staff at different levels of the organization, dependent on where the material lives. So in these, the reconsideration request would go to the principal or via the teacher to the principal then, if it was classroom library. The decision would be made by the principal since they're under the purview of the principal's responsibility, and the appeal would be then to the superintendent. As I said, I kind of marked these up a little differently than you may be used to seeing, because what I am attempting to do is share with you the changes in the new proposed policy compared to what you saw in the spring, not compared to what our current policy is. So if it's the regular text is just the current proposed language, I highlighted in yellow any new language or wording in the current version that was not in the previous proposed version that you saw with Director Callahan. And I used a red strike through to show language that has been removed by OSBA from the one you saw in the spring to the current. And then regular strike through for where there were decision points made or language that we would propose to change. There's a little bit of proposed new language that's not in the current version that I also wanted to call out because it got pretty, there's a lot in there. So let me go into, are there any questions on the kind of my lead up before we dive right into the policies and the ARs? I only see 6 of you and no hands, so I'm going to keep rolling. Just, mute and ask questions at any time during this. So for the actual policy, instructional materials, you'll see, and these are kind of parallel throughout the ARs as well, these that I will call out in the policy, is that they've taken out that, because it became a little bit redundant once what is in yellow was added, but they took out this sentence, the process to select all materials will show respect for all people, regardless of race, color, etc. We want to note that, well, the language here that you'll see in yellow is updated. Centennial School District has long held non-discrimination practices in dedication to equity and inclusion, and the commitment that our students see themselves represented in the literature in our schools. So while this language may be new in our policy, it does not change our past practice when it comes to instructional materials. But as I noted, those ORSs that got some amendments are specifically now called out in the policy for the protected groups. That anyone responsible for selection or retention of the materials can't prohibit the selection of or refuse to select or retain materials as well. Some minor changes in that it's not just a reconsideration, it's a reconsideration request. We are proposing adding this sentence here in green throughout a couple of the different locations that just kind of clarifies that principals are ultimately responsible in their buildings for maintaining and implementing our district requested materials and academic programming. The policy goes on to include some definitions, of which I kind of reviewed with you before. Core instructional material is that core adoption that we bring to you annually based on the cycle and that the board does approve. Rose, yes, question.
Can you go
Director
back to that
Slawski.
last green statement? Yes.
Yes.
Is there cost associated with that is getting passed down to the principals because of this statement that like the district should be covering, or like what exactly does this mean?
Cost, did you ask?
Yeah, like if we say you need to use this certain curriculum and principals are responsible for maintaining those materials, does that mean that like it's the district paying for the curriculum,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the district is
Okay.
responsible for it. This sentence is kind of to clarify that, you know, when we adopt materials, that is ultimately the principal's responsibility to ensure that
Yes.
those are being implemented and maintained in their buildings.
Thank you.
Director Harden.
Yeah. What about the scenario where we have an interim principal?
I believe the responsibility
Would it
then
still fall on them?
we would fall on
Or-
them as, you know, in their role as interim principal, of course, with support of, you know, the curriculum department for a principal in an interim position and capacity.
Okay.
You'll see here additionally the definitions for the supplemental instructional materials. Again, those are not part of core instructional materials. They help supplement or differentiate core instruction and are generally either teacher selected or building selected. Sometimes they're district selected, but they're not adopted by the board. This is again where we've kind of distinguished library materials in that are not inclusive of textbooks and differentiates a school library from a classroom library. Question, Chair Shields?
When I'm looking through the entirety of this, and by the way, love that you did the yellow and the red and the black. I mean, it makes it happy, and I appreciate that. There are still items in here that are in the brackets. So can you explain
Yes.
how that works in our process, or
If
or
there's
just
any-
explain later?
No, thank you. Thank you for asking that. And I should have clarified that at the outset. If it's in brackets and we haven't struck it through, we're suggesting to retain that, to adopt that language.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's helpful.
Yes. Lots of You'll even notice some places like where just a bracket was removed. There was a lot of editing done here. And it wasn't always in parallel structure. I'll draw your attention to a couple places in the ARs where that comes up. Again, just continue. I made it bigger. Sorry, I just realized I hadn't biggered it. So that's the end of the policy proposal. So if we move on to, and I need to move my little screen sharing thing. There we go. If we move on to the first AR, if we're ready. I don't see any other hands. This is, again, I'm not certain why it was deemed to be, because it seems to be redundant, but the first AR has the same additional language about protected groups. There was an opportunity to consider language about public meeting laws. We opted to strike that. Any reselection committee would, would be submitting a recommendation, but would not necessarily need to follow public meeting law. The rest of this AR really is, again, more definitions about like school library materials. Again, that the discrimination statement being clarified. And that is the entirety of the first AR. Are there any questions on that one? Okay. Here's where we get, for the next three, there are some consistent revisions that you'll see. The main one being in this first paragraph, that who is eligible to request a reconsideration of materials. So initially it was quite broad to be construed that any member of the community, whether or not they had a child in the school or were an employee of the school, could make a reconsideration request. And the new language now says that, and this is for core instructional materials, so the board is included. The board, a staff member of the district, student was struck out. We are opting, this is our bracket added. I maybe should have put that in green. But we're opting to include students as a potential group that could request a reconsideration. Parent or guardian, new language of a student in the school in the district, may raise concern about core instructional material. And then they added access to use of materials under reconsideration will not be restricted. So not just access, but use of materials will not be restricted during the reconsideration process. No substantial changes to the initial concern part of the process. If there's concerns by any of those people in the previously mentioned group, then for core instructional materials, again, that would be submitted to the principal. Again, anything that's in brackets, we're fine with accepting that proposed language. The principal, and we did add or designee, because in some of our schools, this may fall to an assistant principal. The principal may opt for a designee to meet with the people around their concern, and issue an informal, or try to have an informal resolution issued within 15 days. The process includes staff members most directly involved with the use of the materials as well, regardless of, you'll see that as kind of consistent throughout as well at this just initial concern stage. Come on, keep scrolling. So then if the person who submitted the concern is not satisfied with the outcome, they have 10 days from the conclusion of that to file a official written request for consideration. Which takes us to the second step. Again, you'll see in this AR and the following two, it follows a similar process, just the types of materials are different. So again, distinguishing that it needs to be a staff member of the district, parent or guardian of a student in the district, and we are proposing also to involve students as people who could request a reconsideration. And this section in B is specific to core instructional materials that only requests for consideration from these people will be considered, and that they must have completed step 1 first. You'll see here there were some brackets where there were decision points in the one you'd saw in the spring that are now not decision points. It's the suggested language. That's what those red brackets mean. So we are therefore asking that all requests for considerations will be in writing. It can be, electronic or handwritten on the form prepared for the purpose, which is in AR5, and signed by the purpose making the request. In this instance, because it's core instructional materials, if it's not resolved at the school level, it's submitted to the superintendent next. The other part that will be consistent across this and then subsequent to ARs is about the makeup of the reconsideration committee. There was some suggested language you'll see that's struck out here that indicates that people are selected annually, and who selects them. Oftentimes we don't get a lot of requests for consideration. So oftentimes these reconsideration committees are kind of ad hoc when the need arises, and really in specific, the people on the committee may be really specific to the types of materials, the use of the materials, the grade level of the materials. So in order to make it just a little cleaner, we are suggesting this language here. Whoa, it really jumped. Sorry. Curriculum and student, that there would be, curriculum and student learning, curriculum and student learning administrator would be a non-voting person, but as a facilitator. There wasn't a facilitator indicated in the proposed, and I think that that's important for this types of work. District librarian, we don't have school librarians, so it made sense for us to do school librarian, or district librarian, sorry. And then 2 teachers, 1 additional administrator, members of the community, with an option to include a secondary student for at least 9 members. 7 members. Question, Chair Shields.
Where am I missing it?
Where are you trying to see? I'm sorry.
So there's the librarian, 2 teachers, 1 administrator, 2 members, 6.
And 1 student optional. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 if we include the student. And if it's not, then it's not limited to. So we may, have another member of the community, another administrator, or another teacher.
And is community defined well enough throughout this, policy and or AR that it has to be a member of the district?
That's a really good question.
I don't want to get down there and find out that somebody says, well, I'm a member of the community and I want to be there.
Right. No, that's a really good question. And we can consider some clarified language about that. Members from the community, we could go back up to language similar here of a student of a school in the district, or
You can also
you know,
say as defined in, and then just reference back up in the policy, a paragraph or a section,
okay, okay,
instead of having to line it out. But it was, we've been specific, and so I want to continue to be specific.
thank you.
Why would we make a secondary student optional if we really need 7 members?
If it was
I,
an elementary issue,
That would be why.
then I
Can
would.
I think too that the facilitator, are we counting the facilitator as a person or not?
no, because they're
Non-voting.
non-voting. Yeah, we want 7 for the vote, the purpose of voting.
And Melissa's got her hands up too. Is it about this too, Melissa?
It is. I was just, when you say community member, I thought, did you mean community partner like Sun or Metropolitan or, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Or do you mean community member, someone who resides in the Centennial School District community?
That is not well defined, as you see down here in number 4. Even in the, original proposed, it just said members of the community. So I think if that's an area that we'd like to provide some clarification, we can make that determination.
Well, because we
I
have
just,
them.
when I read these as general, we use community in 2 separate ways as we are creating these policies and statutes and various other things through our governance. So I just want to make sure that if we are listing community member, that it means within boundaries of Centennial, or whether that means community partners. And so I just think that that language becomes a little bit important because we tend to use them interchangeably throughout some of this. So I think that we just need to define that just clearly. It's not a criticism or like, oh, change this immediately. It just, that overall structure, I think, needs to be clear.
It makes sense to me that it would be one who lives within the boundaries of the district, or who has a student in the district.
That's why if you can go back and find a specific section like 2A, as defined as in 2A, which does give you parent or guardian student. Because or just extend. Yeah, no, it's got to be defined. And we've got to know who can be on the committee. And as Melissa said, that's too broad and 2 different combinations of definitions that could confuse us later on. We've been lucky, I guess, but this has been a contentious issue, right? In some districts,
it has been.
Clarity is,
and I think sometimes often in some of those districts, the challenge was brought from a member of the community who was not a parent or guardian of a student in the school. So I think part of the language in 2A is to clean that up, but does it open it up down here in D number 5? Yeah. Good.
Do we think as a group that one secondary student should be optional? I'm feeling like maybe it shouldn't be optional. Maybe that's one of the 7.
Well, except Superintendent Owens brought up, what if it's an elementary reconsideration versus a secondary? Would that make a difference? And it's a high school student, and I'm assuming high school student, versus on about an issue of reconsideration for a primary grade adoption.
Yeah,
I guess that's the question mark that Melissa and
either way, it might be a good experience for the high school student to sit through. But
Melissa,
two things. I don't know that you're going to get too many high school students that want to sit through this sort of thing. First, second, I think that that's something that you can be specific with language again, where it can say one secondary student as based on curriculum need, or as based upon, state standards and guidelines. Like, I think you can get very specific in that language as well. You're not going to need secondary students to sit in on an elementary process and vice versa. I just think we have to be very clear in that sort of language for the current board and then the future board and future use.
Noted. Taking notes. Shall I move on to the remainder of the AR? I'm seeing some nods. All right.
Yes, and when you come back to us with that, we've got two members who are not here. And hopefully they will have an opportunity to have listened to the question marks.
Mhm.
But this might be a color,
Yep.
right? To
Got
remind
it.
us that there was this
I'll
there's
find a
whole
new one.
discussion in blue. I don't know. Maybe something that might be helping us with that. Thank you.
Again, clarifying that the materials will stay in place and use during the reconsideration process. The procedures for the reconsideration committee are pretty straightforward. Select, a chair and a secretary, adhere to all established policies, have a calendar, look at the materials, consider the materials suitability, in use of, or in context of the use and the request, review in entirety, the material in entirety, considering level of difficulty, age groups. You'll see also, again, this is consistent across all three ARs. An opportunity will be provided for the person who filed the request and staff members involved to offer oral or written testimony on the reconsideration. Outside consultants, lay people, other staff members, or other individuals will be offered an opportunity to provide that testimony within procedures or limitations that may be established by the committee. And that we will keep the person who made the request informed throughout the process, and that after weighing everything, the reconsideration committee will discuss continued use with no restrictions or modifications, or removal of the materials. Again, with the caveat that we can't remove on the basis of perspectives or stories of protected groups. That there's the procedures for voting are laid out, and that a vote from a majority of those present is required. And that they have 45 days to make the final recommendation. The recommendation and justification will be forwarded by the superintendent to the board, because again, the board is the one who adopts core materials, so the board would be the final the recipient of the recommendation. The board has 30 days in order to make a final decision at a meeting. And then needs to provide a written explanation for the decision that will be made available to the public prior to any removal. And again, we are just having that sentence about principal responsibility for implementing and maintaining required materials. Any questions on the next few? Should run a lot more quickly because they're very similar.
Question about board review, number 4.
Number 4.
Yeah. If the board is going to give what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, 6 lines down, and a written explanation of the decision. The decision is only to affirm or the process, correct?
Yes. Oh, well, no, this, the board can take the recommendation and make a final decision.
Okay. Because this is core.
This is course. So, yes.
Okay. That's what I have to keep reminding.
Will have been adopted by the board through the adoption process. Yes, this one is different. There is no appeal on this one.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Just have to remind myself.
So AR3 is for supplemental instructional materials. Most of this is the same. They struck out the language "or resident of the district," which kind of goes to that discussion we were having previously. that concerns, oh gosh, keeps moving. Will, same process that if the original, concern was not met to this, what the, complainant wanted, that it could then go to reconsideration. Only requests from considerations from staff, students, parents. And here, interestingly, you'll see that student was not struck out in this one. So there wasn't that parallel structure, but we want to maintain student in the parallel. That the reconsideration committee, same verbiage. So I'll take that into consideration when I revise these for our next read. That the procedures for the reconsideration committee are the same. And that this part was struck, that the written recommendation will be forwarded to the principal, and then a copy of that sent for reconsideration to the board, because there is now a decision point down here below. So after the voting and the vote, there was a decision point whether to have to kind of go through a similar process above, or as in the previous one, or we are proposing this language here, that the decision will be regarding that if the decision will be in writing, justification, and that if they want to appeal, it would be appealed to the superintendent, and that the decision would be communicated to everyone. The appeal would be to the superintendent through, as opposed to the board, again, because this is supplemental materials, which is approved by the curriculum department and the superintendent, as per, the board giving them the superintendent that responsibility. The rest of this is similar to the one before. And then the AR4 is reconsideration of library materials in a school or classroom library. Same clarification of who can make that request, and then distinguishes the difference. We struck out the building's designated librarian because not all our buildings have a designated librarian. So selected principal as the language there for who the concern would go to. And that the initial response, again, would be the responsibility of the principal or designee, and that if that was not, to someone's liking, they could do an official request for consideration. Same language as in the other about the reconsideration committee and the procedures for that committee. And then that the procedures for voting, again, this is parallel language to the other ones. And that this one would again be appealed to the superintendent, because they're library materials that are selected either by the district librarian or by individual classroom teachers. And those are the 3 different ARs that go over the procedure. Any questions on those? All right. The AR5, oh yes, Director Harden.
So my question is, if we have each building responsible for supplemental library materials, are we going to have different content at all the different schools?
We could. Especially in like a classroom library, because that's where teachers have some autonomy of what books they bring into their classroom library. There may be some consistent things that the district or school librarian says, we're buying this for all 2nd grade teachers. We're buying these 5 books, but then teachers can bring in their own. Additionally, supplemental materials can be purchased with like Title I funds to really respond to this specific needs of students in those buildings based on their school improvement plans.
Okay.
That would be,
Thank you.
it doesn't deviate from core. It just down the road, there may be a few things.
Correct. Correct. So
For a
we
school.
might have a reconsideration request that's specific to a school that is offering a book that others schools may not.
And the decision
Or-
made at that school stays at that building.
I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit.
Oh, sorry. So if we reconsider at a specific facility, then that will influence just that one facility.
I think it depends on how the request
one building.
is made. If the request is made just for a school, but if someone is aware of materials that they might have become aware of initially at, the school their child attends, but then recognize it's at other schools, they may make the request for all of
Other
the
schools.
schools.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Not to get too far in the weeds. Just
Yeah.
thinking about potential.
AR5 is the form. We are fine with the suggested form questions and information that's collected. And then AR6, it seems a little out of place in this, but is part of instructional materials. And it is just related that we can do an independent adoption of core instructional materials when it comes time to adopt. We don't have to select one that's on ODE's list. We can do an independent adoption. So that just clarifies that ability to do that. Any further questions?
On your slide, you don't move. So going back into it, but in your slide presentation, I pulled up the comparisons because I was working with trying to remember core and what it is. Where can that live in our process to help people have a visual of how it works?
Oh, as opposed to the definitions that are in the policy.
Well, yeah, I mean, good grief. This thing is like a tome. I mean, it just keeps
Oh, you
going,
think? It
right?
really
It's
is.
like,
Yeah.
oh boy. But the comparisons, when I keep going back and looking at this chart that you provided in your overview for us, I go, oh yeah. No, that goes there. That goes that thing. Yes. The only thing that's a challenge for me with it is that, it says instructional materials. We would have to massage it a bit and make sure that's consistent with the language, but at least it gives me an idea of what, if I'm going to tackle this, this is the process. So I don't know. You guys can work on that. That's a cabinet decision. But I would, it just helped me tremendously to keep looking at the chart to help me figure out where I was with these ARs.
Superintendent Owens, when was the last time, or Director Olson, when was the last time anybody made a request about our literacy materials?
I'm unaware of any requests.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Woohoo. Back to our agenda.
Principal Miller, has there been any requests that you're aware of at the high school level?
No request at the high school.
Thank you.
And knock on wood and consider us lucky. After seeing some of the things we've seen. We are in new business. Item 2, first read of policy JOA, directory information, and Superintendent Owens, you are on deck for that.
Great. Thank you, Chair Shields. Let me just pull it up briefly. All right, hopefully this is a little bit more straightforward than what we just went through. Nevertheless, what I will say is that the State Board of Education recently made changes to their rules regarding directory information and student permanent records. And then you'll see in the proposed policy, the red lines and changes that were included with that. I have a couple of things that I could point out with it. One of which is one thing I got tripped up on was on number 7, where it strikes through grade level. If it's not directory information, then that means implicitly that it's now personally identifiable information. And so it has a higher regard in terms of being confidential. The concern I had was with like high school activities and athletics in terms of flyers and things of that sort that indicate the athlete or the competitor or the person who's involved and their grade level. I talked with Principal Miller and he could weigh in on this a little bit if he'd like as well, but that can be potentially addressed with whatever permission slip is used to join that activity, if they want to consent to having that piece of information included in any sort of promotionals that they do. So there's ways around it, I guess is my point. Principal Mueller, would you add anything to that?
I would not. That sounds good summary.
So this is intended to be a first read, but I invite any questions that board members may have about what they see.
Be good. I do not see any hands raised or any concerns. All right. Ooh, that'll make it easy at our next meeting.
Yeah, and if we believe it's straightforward, I mean, between now and the next board meeting, feel free to reach out if there's any questions. If there's not, then I would suggest that we maybe put this in confirmation items.
Oh. That would work.
Thank you, Chair.
So board members, unless they feel like you need to come back and discuss it, it'll be in confirmation items. If you need to discuss it, you can always pull it out for that discussion. Excellent suggestion. So moving on to new business item number 3, first read of policy JFGAR, student searches. And this is Director Southerton.
Great. Good evening, everyone. So we have a first read tonight of a voluntary policy update. This is the most recent policy from OSBA. Missy Grindle, or Board Secretary Missy Grindle, has identified we're doing a voluntary update. So 2015 was the most recent policy. You can see it hasn't been updated since then. And so we're hoping to align the language in this policy to be more student-centered and student-focused and aligned to current practice. So the additions are highlighted in blue bolded font, and they begin in paragraph 7, or excuse me, paragraph 4, student search, subparagraph F, and then the recommended removal aspects are the red with the strike through. So paragraph F adds the language: students who identify as non-binary will be allowed to choose the gender of the district staff member who conducts the search. Previous language was that would be of the same gender, as you see in the earlier portion of the paragraph. And then subparagraph H, there would strike of the same gender, in case that wasn't available or that wasn't the student's preference. Or that we didn't have a non-binary staff member potentially at a non-binary student. So metal detectors, simply adding the or designee component there for that existing language. So that's in the paragraph, or the paragraph 5 or section 5, paragraph A. And then on the bottom of that page under discipline, we do occasionally confiscate contraband or inappropriate items. There are times when the family does not want it returned. So this codifies the practice of the district destroying a non-illegal item, because illegal items we turn over to the law enforcement. Legal but prohibited at the school items we return to families. if families do not want them, then we are left with items in our possession that we cannot return, we do not turn over, and currently, as the policy is written, cannot destroy or discard. So this just allows that practice. Documentation, this is the current practice that a designee, not the administrator themselves necessarily, documents every search. And so this would ensure that the appropriate staff member documents it. It does still require the documentation to occur. And unless paragraph A there, unless it's part of their normal plan. So we do have students that are part of their normal safety plan or their IEP have a daily search. And so currently we're required to keep those records every single day, not just when there is something prohibited found, but just a daily search. And so this would change the practice so that if it's already documented in their plan that they have a daily search, there's not the redundancy or the need to create additional forms and documentation. All those changes are called out in the board note as well. We are recommending updating the student search form as well. So gender identity rather than just gender, for example, and then having some gender neutral language in bullet point 3. So rather than his and her, it's their. So overall, I think just up to date in alignment with student focused and student supportive language. I welcome any questions you may have.
Melissa has her hand up.
I read all of these so quickly, and I'm sure that I just missed this, but this has been pretty timely, and this one jumped out for me. Is there language that we have included in our policy that I'm missing or that we could add that is a little bit more trauma informed, that kids can choose a secondary adult to do the search for them? It doesn't necessarily have to be same gender or different gender, just that lens of looking at it with that student comfort level where it's already sort of an invasion of their own privacy. If we could add some language in there where it allows the student to ask for either a staff switch or a secondary adult to be present, could we look at including that in the policy as well?
Yeah, I would say I'd certainly welcome the feedback and the suggestions of the board for the AR. There was some back and forth conversation a little bit on that, whether you would want to be introducing that optionality where a student could choose a gender of a different gender than they identify to search them, and just that dynamic potentially. But I welcome feedback and suggestions from the board.
Yeah, I bring this up just having acted as principal last week at my school.
Yeah.
We had to do a backpack search daily for a student, and he was much more comfortable having myself and the secretary there, two females, in doing that for him. That was his comfort level. So I bring that forward. Is it the student made the choice? It went a heck of a lot easier allowing the student to have some of that sort of ownership. He knew it had to happen. And so just keeping some of that in mind as we're doing some of the language development and sort of policy development there. Again, I don't have anything against this policy. It's important and it exists, but having been someone that's had to conduct these, there are things that pop up for kids. So
I think it's a great question, and to answer it spot on, yes, you could certainly add that to the policy. It says, that the default would be the same gender, and we could strike that, right? We could put anybody, not just a student who identifies as non-binary, but any student could choose the gender of the folks that would be providing the search. So short answer is, yeah, we could certainly, or you all could certainly want that in there, and we could make that change when we bring it back for the second read.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because there's some judgment there for when you're first coming to a student saying, I think you're non-binary. So now I'm going to ask if you want this thing.
Mm.
Whereas instead you're just coming to every student saying, hey, I want to ask who you feel most comfortable with. It's not, it's again the same for everyone, not singling out those who are non-conforming.
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful suggestion to include that in there. I don't know if Principal Miller, you probably have this process the most at your school, just simply numbers. You have the largest student body population at a single school. Any thoughts on?
No, definitely making students feel the most comfortable offering choice. There is a limiting factor on when staff are available. And that is especially like, give you an example on arrival and dismissal, when we have to institute back searches the most, it's staff availability that actually drives a lot of this. But yes, providing as much choice as possible so they feel as comfortable as possible is something that we want, and it aligns with our goals.
Raise your hands again.
It is. I am. My only pushback would be is our staffing changes, but the needs of our students shouldn't. So I'd like our policies to stay disregarding whether it's whoever is in place, whether it's Tom or Tommy in place, that it's for the students first and staff secondary in these instances. I don't mean that everywhere. I just mean when it's student focused.
Great. I'll note that and have it updated when I bring it back for a second read.
Yeah, and I'd like, because it's giving me pause, because I also know that there's ways of, let's just play devil's advocate. What do I know about the policy? What I don't know about the policy as a student that's going through this particular process. I don't want things hung up based on the fact that I don't want things not proceeding, right? That are necessary to proceed. I don't know how you're going to balance that. It's going to be very interesting to see how you word this when you come back. Let's have a good time with this one.
Yeah, I guess.
And I think you're going to have to.
Yeah.
I would imagine. I'm not maybe, and I don't know this to be true. I'm just supposing that this is. There's more likelihood of some of these kind of concerns at the middle school and the high school that we would have to take into consideration. So I really would want you to, really think that through, and maybe even with your proposed changes in the board note that you present to us in our next go around, that the way your decision-making process is given to us, the explanation kind of in consideration of the discussion in our previous meeting, it was decided. I just need to know why. I may have a difference of opinion on lots of things, but having the understanding of why is important in process and policies. So anyway,
That's helpful. Thank you. Yeah, I may offer a preview of including language for student choice, but also maybe some additional language that says unless not readily available in the building or in the school, something like that. There are cases when a search is, a potential, firearm or something is alleged, and delay could pose arguably greater harm, right? So I think ensuring that we have something like that, I think with unduly, over burdening it.
Appreciate that. Melissa
Make
put
it
a comment in the chat too for consideration. So
perfect.
have a good time, you two. That sounds like it's going to be something that you're going to be working together on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Then we're going to move on to Superintendent Owens, future agenda items.
All right, we've got a few here. We have just a reminder to Chair Shields' email recently. There's an executive session that is positioned before our next board meeting related to a couple matters that will be communicated to you here shortly in more detail. As for that, the meeting itself, we have a proclamation for Black History Month. We have the Meadows Elementary School report, a facility planning update with DLR. Dr. Katsuda will be sharing the student transfer process report and the recommended transfer parameters. It's that time of year. We will perhaps have the MESD local service plan. I think Mr. Miller is working on some student recognitions. We will have, we'll bring back some of the policies that we went through tonight and perhaps introduce one or two more. And then we'll also finish the meeting in an executive session, which has already been placed on board members' calendars. So we've got quite a bit coming up on February 11th.
Thank you. Directors, you want to add anything to that? That's a lengthy list that we're going to be going over. Plan for a long evening, but at least we'll feed you at the first executive session. That's the plan. Before I adjourn, I have a procedural question I'd like to ask.
Can I?
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I wasn't.
Yes, I was just going to throw out there, if anybody else is going on the 13th down to Salem and wants to carpool, let me know. That's it.
Cool. Thank you. So, Executive Assistant, Missy, should I be reading the information about the executive session prior to the adjournment?
Yes.
Okay. I think I made a mistake the last time, and so I'd like to not do that again if I screwed up. Okay, so board directors, what we're going to be doing is going into executive session. I will be reading the statement and then we will be adjourning. We will stay on this channel, right? Correct? So after the adjournment, I will check in with you to see if you need a 5-minute comfort break. All right, I'm going to read the statement about our executive session. The Centennial School District Governing Board will meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660, subsection 2, subsection D, and ORS 192.660, subsection 2, subsection K, to conduct deliberations with persons designated to carry on labor negotiations and consider matters relating to school safety or a plan that responds to safety threats needs towards a school. All right, it's understood that we will be moving into executive session and only those members of the board are related to these two matters may continue to be in attendance. So it is what time? 9:37 p.m. So we are adjourning our regular meeting and saying goodnight to those who are not involved in the executive session. Bye to those. The rest of us, haha, stay here. All right, board